Good morning, Grace Art volunteers. I hope everyone's doing well. Lisa and I decided to try to have a virtual Grace Art meeting today since we obviously were unable to do so because of the snow. This particular project is going to seem complicated, and we wanted to make sure everyone felt comfortable with it. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a situation where we didn't have a Grace Art jam session in preparation for the meetings that you'll have in your classrooms. As a result, we're going to try to do, like I said, this Grace Art meeting virtually and produce some YouTube videos for you. What I've learned, since this is at least my third take of trying to do this, I am not a very good actress on camera. So please bear with me as I do a little bit of a presentation for you about Henry Moore. Henry Moore is a British artist, and he is most well known for his sculpture. In fact, some people will say he is the supreme sculptor of the 20th century. They say that, or there was a story at least, that he knew he wanted to be a sculptor even as a young child. When he was in Sunday school, they were teaching him about Michelangelo, and from that moment on, he decided that's what I want to be when I grew up. So if that is a true story, he was very successful in his overall plan. In World War I, he first started studying art, and in 1929 he married his wife, to whom he stayed married for his entire life. He had one daughter. And then in 1940 there was a turning point for Moore, and that is that he became an official war artist in World War II. At this time, he was doing drawings, and he would show Londoners kind of huddled together, protecting themselves against Nazi bombing raids. And he started to become famous because the artist's rendering of these Londoners protecting themselves was very sensitive, and it showed, the British people thought that it showed them in a very heroic gesture, heroic light. And so the English people never forgot about Moore and thought of themselves as being shown as very brave and in their finest hour. And after the war, he was recognized as one of England's foremost artists, and his stature increased from that point on. He was, at that point, like I said, doing drawings for people in World War II, but he definitely is more known as a sculptor. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about now. I'm going to try to hold up the posters and talk about them as I do so. The lighting is not good, so I apologize for that, but at least you'll get an idea. So this is the first poster, and it just has pictures of Henry Moore kind of doing his sculpture. He died in 1986, but it shows him, the artist at work, which I think is interesting and something that the kids can relate to. As we've talked about in the past, there are several different types of sculptors. They can do assembly, which is what we did when we did the trees. That artist was an assembly artist. You can do molding, which you take clay and build up, and that is another type of sculpture. And then there's kind of the carving, which is what Henry Moore is known for, where he would take a piece of material and carve it for whatever he was trying to do. And this is one of he had three main themes of what he would do when he was sculpting. And the first theme is called family group, but it's also really well known as, a lot of his work is mother and child in terms of family groups, specifically mother and child. So that's what this picture is here, a mom and her baby. And then there's a couple of other family groups that are shown on this poster here. This poster is called Compare and Contrast, and on here you have two pictures of mother and child. And it's mother and child, and you can ask the kids this and see, how would they know that it's mother and child. But you see in both cases a small figure sitting on the lap of a mom. So the fun thing about this poster, I think, is actually asking the kids, what makes them similar and what makes them different, because they're both done by the same sculptor. What makes them similar is their similar subject matter. They both are in vertical composition, meaning they're up and down in terms of their composition. And some of his sculptures are different. They're horizontal in nature, so that's one thing that's similar here. The texture is similar. They both probably, if you look at them, you can see that they feel smooth. They're definitely not like a rough-edged, sculpture. And the other thing that they are, and most of his work is three-dimensional. So you can actually walk around the sculpture and see it from all sides. How are they different? Well, they actually are quite different in the way that they show, detail, and the way one is more stylized than the other. So this one here, shows more detail. You can definitely see that it is a mother and child. It's definitely more figural, more human in nature. You can see soft curving lines. Here, this one here, the one on the other side, is a lot less detail. It's more stylized, meaning that the figures does not show real detail or lifelike features. And it doesn't necessarily resemble humans, and maybe has a little bit more harder lines than you would see on the other one. But both of these are done by Moore and show the different range of detail that he shows in his different sculptures. The second theme that Henry Moore is well known for is called the reclining figure. And as we were just discussing in the previous case, the sculptures that were done for the mother and child that we looked at had a vertical composition. Here you can see that these have more horizontal composition, the reclining figure. And I'll lift it up so you can see the ones on the bottom as well. They're very similar. Also similar to the last poster, you can see that some of the figures are more realistic, and some of the figures, like this one here, this one right here, some of them are a little bit more stylized and not as obvious that they're human pictures, or human beings reclining. I think this one's definitely more stylized here. These I think are a little more stylized as well. So that is the third one. And this, on my paperwork that I've sent you, there's definitely a number of questions you can ask the kids when they're looking at this picture. How do you know these sculptures are people? That's a good question, especially for ones that are stylized, because it's not necessarily obvious that it's a person. Which figures are more realistic? Which ones are more abstract? Do you think that different types of materials were used? And what do you think the texture is? Are these sculptures vertical or horizontal composition? These are all questions you can ask the kids to get them involved in the conversation as you're talking about the artist. The third theme, and the next poster, is called A Form Within a Form. And these, I think, are kind of hard to see with my lighting, so I apologize. But you can see that there's actually figures within other figures. There's like someone kind of within this one here. Down here you can see that as well. These are called form within a form in terms of the style, and that's the third theme that he's very well known for in his art. When you look at some of his artwork, in particular when you're talking, and actually this was true of reclining figure as well, but when you look at form within a form, you can see how there is negative space created when you do artwork. And negative space is what you can actually, where there is not sculpture, but you can see through, and it creates like a space in itself. And that is part of the art itself. And you can talk to the kids about what is negative space. And, one thing you can do is, for example, I have this propped up on a chair. I'll use it as a prop for my presentation. But you can see that this chair has negative space as well, because there's holes within the slats of my chair. You can talk to the kids about negative space and what that means. The negative space that Henry Moore had in his art was very important to his art and made a great statement to what he did. Henry Moore also had a pretty strong opinion about where his sculpture was going to be displayed. He said he would rather have a piece of sculpture put in landscape, almost any landscape, than a beautiful building. And he would actually design his sculpture with respect to where it was going to go. So he would find out where the sculpture was going, and based on that, he would use his, that would help him determine what he was going to sculpt. So once the theme was decided, where the location was going to be was really important to him. When he was creating sculptures for an outdoor setting, Moore was able to create larger forms. He said, because it satisfies my desire. Whereas in early days, some of my sculptures had to be small in size. You can't make a small piece of sculpture stand outside, it just gets lost. It should be over life size when it's outside because the open air reduces things to scale. So this here shows some of his artwork in landscape. And it's interesting, you can actually see to scale. So this is, I guess, in a pasture, and you can actually see, the scale about what he was able to create once it was outdoors. Here's another example of one that is sculpture in landscape. And then lastly, and this is the last poster, which is, how do you know these sculptures are by Henry Moore? And I think essentially this is just a conversation piece with the kids. One thing you can talk about with them is that they're stylized. You don't actually know what exactly he was trying to portray, but you have an idea, possibly just the way it looks. You can talk to them about the negative space. This one has some good negative space. This one also has some good negative space here. You can see that. And then you can talk about the fact that they're in the landscape, which we said he preferred to do. You can also talk about the fact that they're just of huge scale, because that was something that he preferred as well. So that is just my little overview on Henry Moore. And if you will just click on the next YouTube, Lisa will demonstrate the project for you. So if you have any questions about Henry Moore, the project, or anything coming up, please do let us know, and we would be happy to help you. You can email me at sbhelmicky@aol.com. And by now, everyone should have received their materials. So if you need anything clarified with respect to that, please let me know that as well. Thanks so much.